Many of these artists are also educators and have been of great influence throughout the country, not just our state, one of which is Arturo Alonso Sandoval. Arturo came to Kentucky in 1974 to teach at the University of Kentucky and has influenced generations of textile artists and general artists throughout our state. Arturo comes from not only Native American roots, but also Hispanic roots. Arturo works with unusual materials. He is a bit of a pack rat in the sense that he gathers things around him that he can recycle into his weavings. His formats are almost always of large scale, and he works with unusual elements such as mylar and film from libraries. Another artist of note in our state is the educator and weaver Phyllis Alvick, a graduate of the Art Institute of Chicago, and one of her interests has always been academic in terms of the history of her craft. Her works herself, she's a great colorist, one of the things I admire the most about her work, and she has many, many patterns, intricate, that she knows how to weave on her looms. And what she has done recently are a series called portals. And these are like door frames or windows with layers of fabric tacked together and making an entranceway visually of depth and great color. Another artist in this exhibition of note is Elmer Lucille Allen. Lucille has had a 31-year career as a chemist at Brown-Forman. She was one of the first women of color to break the barrier as chemist in her field in Louisville, and she's recognized for both her ceramic work and her fiber works. She started part-time at the University of Louisville at the age of 71 and worked on until she received her master's degree in ceramics. She's also been involved in textiles most recently, and she's a major player in both the Louisville Clay Group and the Louisville Area Fiber and Textile Artists. Recently, she's been working a lot with batik and with shibori fabric dyeing techniques. Some of them are very ephemeral, and some of them are figurative, and some of them are just patterned, using the dyeing technique and the colors that she's using to create her imagery. Another wonderful textile artist in this show is Dobry Adams. Dobry was born in Mississippi, but was raised in Lexington, Kentucky. And after graduating from Wellesley College, she went into a career of science. But back in Kentucky, she decided to leave her management job and raise sheep on a farm near Frankfort. There she learned to spin and to dye and to weave. She studied weaving with Astra Strobel in Berea at Berea College, and then she went on and studied with Arturo Sandoval here at the University of Kentucky. She's taken many workshops as well, and her techniques are really amazing in that she's almost an impressionist painter with fiber. She likes to have her colors blend and be sort of impressionistic. Texture is a major part of her weavings as well, and she's experimented with felt loom weaving as well. One of the artists in the show who creates sculpture is Dave Cottle. Dave was born near Corbin, and he has a memory of sleeping under his mother's patchwork crazy quilts as a child. One of the things that is impressive about Dave is his spontaneity and his enthusiasm. He is always out for finding something new and seeing new things in the world and bringing them to light through his work. His work is almost like he says in his quote, "I was looking for a common denominator. In essence, that would be communicated in very simple forms, almost like a haiku in a three-dimensional form." And Dave's sculptures are very much like that. They're simply done with lines and steel and sometimes copper, and they're very visually moving. You find yourself looking all around and following the lines of the works. And they're very spontaneous, and they're also very simple in their complexity of movement. Another textile artist in this exhibition is Rebecca Seigel, who lives in Owen County, Kentucky. Rebecca connects us with lots of different people throughout history, in particular women, Her grandmother is a quilter, and her daughter is also an artist, and her quilts carry on the skills she learned from her grandmother and has passed on. She puts exquisite craftsmanship together with quilts that tell stories. And in these series of quilts, she showcased women that have had an effect on the world and on our country in particular. She has done work that has been in many exhibitions throughout the country. Is very active in the American Quilt Society's annual competition. She has for decades shared her love of quilting and art with children across the Commonwealth. She especially has been engaging as an artist in residence for the Kentucky Arts Council. Artist, educator, and jeweler Tim Glotzbach grew up in Indiana, and upon graduating, he took up jewelry and metal classes, intending to open a studio after he graduated. He came to Eastern Kentucky University teaching the jewelry and metals program in 1981, and has since gone on to become an educator and the head of Berea College Student Craft Industries. He was also former dean of the Kentucky School of Craft. He works mostly in precious metals, sterling and gold, and lots of his works are abstractions of shapes and forms put together almost in small sculptures that are wearable. Jennifer Zurich is a self-taught artist who specializes in basketry made from black willow bark, which she has been harvesting and weaving into baskets since 1980. She began working in fiber arts as a young girl. She discovered inkle loom weaving, from there went on to floor loom, and built up a small herd of sheep. She learned how to process their wool, how to spin it, and how to turn it into weavings of her own. Jennifer is strongly influenced by Native American basketry, and the strongest influence on her work, she says, is the Creek Valley where she lives. She actually harvests the bark from a canoe in the water because these black willows grow right at the water's edge, particularly in the Kentucky River Basin. Jennifer has also come up with a way to take this black willow bark and spin it to make a small kind of thin rope that she uses for handles. A number of the artists in this exhibition would refer to themselves as self-taught or as folk artists. One of these is Tim Lewis, who was born in Elliott County, Kentucky. Tim worked as a coal truck driver until he was 35, when an accident brought an end to his career. Looking for something new, he turned to his cousin Minnie Atkins, who was making a living as a folk artist in the area. He had done some wood carving as a young child and picked it up again, making walking sticks. And although his canes were really popular, he wasn't quite satisfied, so he decided in '89 to try stone carving. And he found his niche. His carvings have been included in many exhibitions throughout the country and is in dozens of private collections, including the Smithsonian Art Collection. Ceramic artist Susan Goldstein's work is created with slabs and large pieces of clay that she rolls and folds. Growing up in the Catskill Mountains of New York, she was in love with the outdoors and crafts most of her life. After she got her master's at Tufts University, she took a ceramics class on a whim and has been hooked in working with clay ever since. Susan has been an advocate for the arts for many years. She's past president of the Kentucky Guild of Artists and Craftsmen and founding president of this organization, the Kentucky Craft History and Education Association. She served on many boards and has often given her input and her expertise to many arts organizations throughout the area. Ceramic artist Walter Hylick is a native of Minnesota. He came to Kentucky in 1970 when he founded the unique program at Berea College called the Ceramic Apprentice Program. Walter has guided that program for 38 years until he retired, and he continues now to produce his own work. He participates in solo, invitational, and jury exhibits throughout the country and is in many permanent collections. He works in porcelain and he works in other clays as well, but his forte is his technical expertise and his exploration of abstract ideas and forms. He's a skilled artisan and a wonderful craftsman. And at the same time, he has been a major influence throughout the region and actually throughout the country in training and teaching fine, very well-established ceramic artists. Craftsman Terry Ratliff was born and raised in eastern Kentucky, and when he was 12, his family moved to Indiana. When Terry had an opportunity to transfer to the University of Kentucky, he jumped at the chance to come back to our state. He worked for several years in community mental health in eastern Kentucky, and then he decided to help a friend build a log house, and then he built one for his own family. And then he began building furniture. and this is where he found his true love and began to teach himself and learn all about the craft of chair making and furniture building. He set about using only a sawhorse and a draw knife for the first 8 years of his creative life. Eventually, he began adding different tools and adding holes and all kinds of different ways of joining the wood together. He's worked in wood long enough, he says, to know it flows right out of the ground like a flow of a stream. And Terry says, and I quote, "I have been heavily influenced by the work of renowned chairmaker Chester Cornett, who used to say, 'It takes half a fool to make a handmade basket and a pure fool to make a hand-carved chair.'" Basket maker Leona Waddell was born in 1928 into a family of basket makers. From Hart County in Kentucky, this family traded baskets for groceries and sometimes clothing. And when she started her own family, Leona sold baskets at basket stands all along Dixie Highway, where tourists used to stop to purchase distinctive Hart County baskets. She later sold them to a broker who sold them to upscale stores in New York. She never received what her baskets were truly worth or ever got true recognition, so she quit making baskets and for 17 years worked various other jobs. Retiring in 1977, she made baskets again to earn a little money, but that changed when she won first prize at the Hart County Fair. This basket encouraged her to refine her techniques and began making a wider variety. She finally received recognition she deserved and a fair price for her baskets. In 2001, she helped found the Mammoth Cave Basket Makers Guild, put about to preserve and promote traditional basket making in the South Central region of Kentucky, where it had always been strong. This Mammoth Cave basket making tradition is one of the strongest regional traditions in our Commonwealth. And in 2012, Leona was awarded the Kentucky Governor's Folk Heritage Award. One of her baskets is on exhibit at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. Ceramic artist Wayne Ferguson spent hours as a young boy with his brother making small forts from flour and salt clay that his mother made for them. He specializes in hand-built pottery with very strong and very funny, often, social commentary. After spending time at the University of Kentucky, Wayne later worked at the Arizona State Museum as an archaeology technician, where he was able to dig clay and do wood-firing replica pottery. When he returned to Kentucky, he continued making pottery with an edge. He often made small little whistles he called ocarinos. Wayne is a fine teacher, and he has done many workshops and residencies through the Kentucky Arts Council. In 2004, a car accident caused him to lose sight in his right eye, but it doesn't seem to have stopped Wayne from creating fine artwork and works of beauty and inspiration. Husband and wife artist team Robin and Mary Reed left the bustle of their hometown of Lexington, Kentucky in the 1970s and settled on a homestead on a creek in Estill County on the Daniel Boone National Forest. Their first crafts venture was candle making, but soon they began using other materials available on their homestead. Robin began taking the bark of tulip poplar trees and willow trees and creating baskets from the bark that grew along the banks. The baskets were functional and also decorative. And Mary researched Native American and early American traditions of corn shuck art, learning how to use the outer shucks of corn to create flowers, angels, dolls, and even nativity sets. For 35 years, they produced beautiful handmade crafts and taught workshops. Both of these artists have held leadership roles in craft organizations like the Kentucky Guild of Artists and Craftsmen and the Kentucky Appalachian Artisan Center. Artist Tim Hall grew up in the small town of Ravenna, Kentucky in Estill County, where he still resides. He started out as a frame carpenter and soon found himself looking for other kinds of work. Tim is entirely self-taught as a wood carver. He draws his inspiration from nature and from his surroundings. When he found time on his hands, he turned his hobby into a wood carving of duck decoys, birds, and even wildflowers. Tim has traveled as an arts ambassador for Kentucky, and he has demonstrated his wood carving techniques in Japan. His work has been purchased by the governor and presented to such dignitaries in the Commonwealth as Queen Elizabeth II. He's also traveled to the White House to hang one of his carved ornaments on the Christmas tree of President George Bush. Tim's work is of nature and of the exquisite details that it presents. His carving techniques are very refined and his ability to paint and make these objects that he's carved from wood come to life is extraordinary. Ceramic artist and studio potter Sarah Frederick grew up in Louisville, but as a young woman went to California to study art. Returning to Kentucky, she got her master's degree in ceramics at the University of Louisville under the tutelage of Tom Marsh. In the early 80s, she began running a highly successful production studio. Her works were colorful with pattern on the clay, and they were also functional. Sarah was very active in the beginning years of the Kentucky Crafted program as well. She has mentored many young potters throughout the region. She continues to work in her retirement as a teacher and studio potter. One of the more unusual forms of craft is the art of instrument making. And in this exhibit, we see the work of George Joachim, who came from Lebanon to the United States in 1984 to study engineering at the University of Kentucky. He earned his master's degree and has been working as an engineer ever since. But his interest in music goes back to the first time he saw a violin being played when he was 12. He convinced his parents to get him an instrument, and he learned to play by ear, joining a band and playing in restaurants. Coming to Kentucky, he connected with other Lebanese musicians by playing at weddings and festivals. He was not satisfied with the tonality of his violin. He met J.B. Miller, and he helped Joachim learn to make his own instruments and violins. Joachim went on to build 5 violins before his interest turned to the instrument called the oud. He developed his skills and built them for himself and others. Joachim is now highly respected in both Lebanon and Kentucky for his skill of construction of ouds and the responsive tonality that he creates with his instruments. Glass artist Dan Barnes first learned how to create with his hands by working alongside his father and his uncles. Dan got his BA degree in Human Environmental Design from the University of Kentucky, and it was there that he studied with the well-known artist Arturo Sandoval. After college, he earned a reputation in his furniture and design business, but not being satisfied, he studied stained glass with Laura Hollock and began making traditional glass pieces, such as Tiffany-style lamps. But it wasn't long before Dan was pushing the limits of his new art form. He wanted to create three-dimensional effects and merged glass with different kinds of materials such as metal, wood, and even fabric in multimedia-type creations. His scale continued to grow, and he invited the viewer to experience glass in new ways, often in very sculptural contexts. He's received commissions for numerous buildings and new places throughout the state, making installations from the ceiling and from the walls and from all places that create and capture light. Artist Linda Feifield grew up in a large creative family in the Appalachian community in Knott County, Kentucky. She learned textile skills from her mother and grandmother, who knew how to create hand-constructed garments, quilts, laces, and linens embroidered. In 1974, when she visited the Chicago Field Museum, she became aware of finely made baskets by Native American basket makers. She noticed the similarity in the texture of these woven baskets and in the beadwork that she was making. Linda uses a network of tiny check seed beads to create a network of design that completely covers these turned wooden forms. She creates vessels that have a great beauty and harmony. She was commissioned in 2003 to create the awards that were given to the recipients of the Kentucky Governor's Awards in the Arts. And then in 2015, Linda herself was honored with the Governor's Artist Award. Artist Lavon Williams is noted for numerous careers, one of which is basketball and the other as a sculptor. Born in Lakeland, Florida, he came to the University of Kentucky and was a player on the 1978 University of Kentucky NCAA championship team. When he graduated from UK with a degree in sociology, he went on to play professional ball in both Italy and Spain. And though he never did pursue formal art training, he is indeed a fifth-generation wood carver, and his grandmother was a quilt maker. His uncle taught both him and his brother to carve wood. Lavon's wooden relief carvings capture everyday scenes, like church-going men and women, jazz players and musicians, and especially dancers, all that are inspired by African American history and culture. Always one to find materials wherever he can, any piece of wood, a front drawer of a chest of drawers, anything could be turned into one of his works. Williams sees his wood carving as a way to pass on the heritage of his ancestors and share it with his community. Many of his pieces and his figures have long hands and very large feet, which he says in his quote, "The history lesson here of African Americans in the South, you gotta have music. You have the coming and the going of people. You have the wisdom of the people. You have these feet, which means the people are planted. They are rooted in this place, and they cannot be moved." Nationally known folk artist Minnie Atkins was born in 1934 in Elliott County, Kentucky, where she lives today. Minnie learned to whittle as a young child, and she often said she made her own toys to entertain herself, and then continued whittling and painting fanciful animals as a hobby thereafter. She and her husband Garland moved to Ohio searching for work, and she often sold her carvings at outdoor markets. And when they came back to Elliott County to farm, Minnie began selling her work at Adrian Swain's gallery in Moorhead, and it began to be noticed by folk art collectors. So Minnie began thinking of her work quite differently. She began to rise in fame in the folk art world and was soon having more orders than she could handle. So her husband Garland began working with her, who became quite an unusually talented carver in his own right. Minnie began hosting an annual event called Day in the Country, and it was an attempt to bring other folk artists in their community into contact with collectors who came and flocked to this gathering of artists. She says, I quote, "I helped other people in my community get started as folk artists because that's what we are put here for." Minnie continues to nurture the artist community in Elliott County. She has taught her cousin Tim Lewis, whose stonework is in this exhibit, Joanne Butts, and many others throughout the state.